Hello, welcome to Cloaked and Maple, a podcast that talks about Canadian spies. Today, we're going to be talking about Canadian spies and espionage in World War II, along with the pivotal role they played and the lasting impacts they had. The deployment of Canadian spies was a direct response to the rising threat of Axis aggression and the fear of potential attack on Canadian soil. When France fell to Germany in June of 1940, it pushed Canada into Britain's principal surviving ally. There was concerns over a potential British collapse, which helped push Canada to create an independent Canadian foreign intelligence under William Stephenson, known as a man called Intrepid. But the need for Canadian spies in the first place ran much deeper. When the Treaty of Versailles was created in 1919, they put lots of harsh terms on Germany, such as territorial losses and crippling reparations. These harsh terms put on Germany made it easy for dictators like Adolf Hitler and Nazi ideology to come to be so popular. This, along with Italy's and Japan's unchecked acts of aggression, such as invading Manchuria in 1931 and then China in 1937, along with the invasion of Ethiopia in 1935, pushed Axis powers to be a serious threat towards allied nations like Canada. It was all these different factors that made it clear that Canada needed to become a part of the war, and specifically use Canadian spies to safeguard the nation's security, along with contributing to a broader war effort against the Axis. Once they were deployed, the Canadian spies helped in a range of sort of operations and strategies to help fight against the Axis war efforts. They started this off by training them at a secret spy facility at Camp X near Whitby, Ontario, established in 1941. It was also rumored that Ian Fleming, aka James Bond, trained here as well. The agents here were taught to use different sort of gadgets, decrypt codes, and learn to use different tools that were essential for spying on the Axis powers. After the spies were taught at Camp X, their main goals were to gather intelligence, such as getting information on weapon systems, communications, and military operations by the Axis powers. One of the biggest contributions made by the Canadian spies was helping break the code of a German Enigma machine. Although this was done by British forces at Bletchley Park, it was only possible because of the crucial intelligence gathered by Canadian spies like William Stephenson. There were also many Canadian women who served as spies. They did jobs like transcribing coded messages or converting communications. This often happened in places like Victoria, around where we live, but it was all the way across the country, all the way over to Ottawa, where they had an examination unit. The women across the whole country worked tirelessly around the clock, decrypting the messages. Specifically in Victoria, they were intended to decode the Japanese transmissions, and this played a crucial role at the end of the war. At the Victoria radio station, there were only 11 women working, and they weren't even that far from our age. For example, there was a 19-year-old named Sally Carling who sat beside her desk working for hours. Most of the staff recalls Carling. She's now 82, and she had major contributions to the war efforts. Often, many of these contributions made by the Canadian women spies are overlooked or buried in archives, but it's important we talk about them, especially since they were crucial to supporting the Canadian spies in World War II. Moving on. Next, we're going to be talking about the impact and outcome of Canadian spies on World War II. The intelligence gathered by Canadian spies played a major role in undermining the Axis war efforts, from disrupting the U-boat operations in the Battle of the Atlantic to providing vital information on enemy troop movements and weapon deployments during the D-Day landings in Normandy of June 6, 1944. The Canadian spies' intelligence led to many victories at pivotal moments, such as the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, that ultimately contributed to the defeat of the Axis powers in 1945. The support of Canadian spies helped secure Canada's legacy as an allied force and a major contributor of World War II. This helped shape our modern identity as the country we are today. This Canadian identity also supported us in joining modern alliances like NATO. Additionally, the Canadian spies also helped the growth of intelligence agencies like CSIS and the modern Canadian Armed Forces formed in 1968. For this next part of the podcast, we'll be talking about the issues behind why we needed Canadian spies in the first place and how we're facing these same issues in contemporary history. Originally, the need of Canadian spies during World War II connected with an issue of national security. Nowadays, we face similar issues of national security, although it doesn't look the same. It might not be through an all-out war, but it's through other means like terrorism or cyber warfare. Although it might not be in Canada, there are modern-day conflicts like the Israeli and Palestine conflict or the Russia and Ukraine conflict that still rely on espionage on both sides. The use of modern-day espionage or spying is still very important to monitor threats or track enemy plans. Beyond the modern-day physical wars, there are still very real cyber threats happening on everybody, including Canada. To protect our national security, agencies like the CSIS help protect us. They use different sort of techniques or operations to do that. Mostly the cyber attacks are just to steal sensitive data, disrupt infrastructure, gain technological advancements. But Canada's different sort of techniques on protecting us were heavily influenced by the techniques used during World War II. Additionally, the CSIS and their modern-day techniques resonate to be very similar in how we used to decrypt and decode the different messages coming from Japan and Germany. Just like in World War II, the Canadian spies had to often fight against different sort of threats, run operations, or decode messages. Their modern-day counterparts still operate in the shadows, protecting Canada's national security, and often have to go through similar processes. For this next part of the podcast, we'll be talking about how Canadian spies shaped the modern-day Canadian identity. The efforts made by the Canadian spies during World War II helped shape our national identity and showed that we're a country committed to courage and resilience, along with democracy. Specifically, one of the Canadian spies that helped shape our identity was William Stephenson. I've mentioned him earlier, but he's known as a man called Intrepid. Intrepid means to be fearless, daring, or bold, which in a way helps embody the Canadian spirit. Additionally, William Stephenson was the founder of Whitby's Camp X, which I've also spoke on earlier. Camp X helped fund and support most of the Canadian spying efforts, along with training other British troops. One of these British troops was rumored to be Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond. It's so called that William Stephenson was the inspiration for James Bond. And also, there's a popular book on him called The True Intrepid. Along with William Stephenson, who was a man, there are also many female Canadian spies. These females helped highlight Canada as a progressive country and helped show that we're open to women playing pivotal roles. Additionally, intelligence and warfare is mostly male-dominated, and having the women playing the roles they did pushed us as a progressive and forward-thinking country. This sort of forward-thinkingness really plays a major role in our modern identity, which we are struggling with. In conclusion, Canadian spies played a major role in not only World War II, but also in modern day Canada and shaping the Canadian identity. I believe they haven't been given the credit where credit is due. Instances like cracking the Enigma code or figuring out German U boat movements have often been handed off to the British intelligence agencies, but they wouldn't have been able to operate without the contributions made by the Canadian spies. Thank you for listening to Cloaked and Maple. In our next episode, we're going to be exploring if Hitler's still alive and living in Argentina.